Now that we have created our function, create profile for user, it's time now to call this function. And the idea behind creating this function was that anytime a new user signs up, we'll be calling this function and storing the ID of that particular user in the newly created profile table. So to bring this idea into action, we'll make use of triggers. Over here, if you click on triggers under database and click create new trigger, under conditions to fire trigger, you'll notice that only public schema tables are available. So you don't have access to the auth.users table. But still, we have a workaround for this. What we need to do is we need to go back to our SQL editor. So here we'll be going inside SQL editor. And then we'll be creating the trigger using query. So we'll say create trigger, and then we'll provide it a name. So let's go ahead and say trigger underscore, and we'll keep the name as create profile for user. So this is the name of the trigger, and after that we'll be providing when this trigger is going to take place, that is after insert. And once we have provided that, we also need to tell on which table it needs to listen to. So here we'll say auth.users table, and this action is going to be for each row. So we'll say for each row over here, and then we'll say execute function, and here we'll be providing the name of the function. So our function name was create profile for user. Do note that only functions whose return type is set to trigger is going to be used when you're creating a new trigger. And when you have mentioned the name of the function, don't forget to close it by parenthesis. And once that's done, here you can click on run, and if everything works fine, it says success, no rows returned. Now let's go back to databases, and here we'll be clicking on triggers under auth. You can now see we have our trigger created. You cannot create a new trigger using the UI interface, but if you would like to see what all this UI interface provides, click on create new trigger, and here we'll have name of the trigger, then the conditions to fire trigger. So you need to specify the table which the trigger should listen to, and then we have events over here like insert, update, and delete. Under trigger type, you have this before or after the trigger should execute, and then the orientation over here at row level or statement, and then the functions to trigger. So here if you click on this one, you'll notice only functions that return a trigger will be displayed below. So our function that we created, its return type was trigger, and you can see under public schema that is appearing. So you can create triggers for public schema using the UI wizard, but if you want to access the inner tables like one within the auth schema, you need to make use of the SQL editor. Now that we have done that, let's go ahead and access the users that we have. Under authentication, you'll see this user appearing. Let's go ahead and delete this user. Once deleted, we'll be launching our application. So our application is running, and let's launch it in browser. Here, let's go to the login link that we created, and it says logging in, and we have successfully logged in now. Let's go back to the auth page over here, and you can see the user has now been created. Now we'll go back, and here under tables we'll be accessing our profile table, and you can see the ID has been inserted over here as well.